By the time the crowd filled the stands, the arena floor was already stained with dust and failure. The mech stood waiting, black, massive, undefeated. They were gathering, by land, by sky. Pressed into the booths and behind reinforced glass, they filled the stands with noise. Not cheering, murmuring, waiting. The mech was already there, black plating dulled by time and heat, standing motionless at the center of the arena floor. Even without movement, it was terrifying, taller than anything else, jointed like a predator, balanced on feet that had left footprints in steel. Nothing ornamental, no insignia, just raw function. A gun built into one arm, a plated gauntlet on the other, and somewhere deep inside, a pilot who never left. Lights ran faintly beneath the surface like blood under skin, veins of power that pulsed with a rhythm too steady to be human. It had seen battle in every quadrant. Nearly 24 challengers had faced it. Soldiers in powered rigs, rogue tacticians in stolen directorate armor, gladiators bred in orbital cages. Some came with speed, some with brute strength. All were reduced to silence. Its armor had absorbed plasma bolts, EMP bursts, even a direct railgun strike that turned the arena floor to slag. Its defensive systems were layered. No one got close. Nothing worked. It was impossible not to look at it. Impossible not to imagine what it must feel like to stand in front of that machine, knowing it had never lost. The kind of thing that made you feel small, not just in body, but in meaning. The other gate hadn't opened yet. Someone laughed. Another cursed. Then the gate began to rise. He stepped out slow, almost hesitant. No armor. Just a suit meant to keep pressure regulated and lungs clean. Pale fabric streaked with weld soot and repair grease. One hand on a canvas sack hanging from his shoulder, the other tucked behind his back. No one could quite see his face through the scratched visor. He didn't wave, didn't look up. Just walked straight ahead, boots leaving small prints in the dust, until he stood opposite the mech. He looked like nothing. A misfiled technician, maybe. Someone who belonged behind a panel or inside a repair duct. Not here, not facing that. But he didn't turn around. He didn't hesitate. Just stopped, squared his stance, and waited. Silence. Then a low hum from the mech's chest. Systems warming. Lights igniting along its spine. The cannon arm dropped slightly. The targeting lens spun once. The crowd tensed, some leaning forward, some leaning away. The ground itself seemed to hold his breath. He didn't flinch. Reached slowly into the sack. Pulled something out. Small, dull, heavy. Not a pulse rifle. Not a rail shooter or plasma torch. Just a weapon. Metal. Primitive. An antique by most standards. Burn scarred along the barrel. Wood grip cracked. He held it loosely in one hand, raised it, and leveled it at the machine. There was no pause in the mech's movement, no change of posture, no flinch, no shift. The machine had seen every kind of weapon in every kind of hand. Nothing this size had ever mattered. But there was something only the technician knew. He'd worked in the subgrids, in the cooling halls where waste heat was siphoned into the crust. He'd seen schematics, repairs, things the builders had buried under layers of armor and silence. And he had seen one detail, one obsolete fiber junction, a legacy port never rerouted, left behind because even the engineers had assumed it would never matter. The mech charged the cannon. The sound rumbled across the arena like thunder caught in a bottle. The shot came first, from the old weapon, just one. A pop more than a boom, muffled, weak. The crowd barely reacted, but the mech did. The shell struck just below the left shoulder at the seam between two plates, where the cooling vent opened to expose a nest of soft conduit, bundled lines coiled like muscle and nerve. The impact was perfect. A piece of metal no wider than a finger tore through a braided loop of signal fiber and pierced the hydraulic feed. The mech twitched. The cannon arm faltered. Lights along its flank stuttered, then dimmed. It took a step forward, locked, tried to balance, failed. The whole frame tilted, gears screaming inside the torso. It didn't fall gracefully. It dropped like a dropped tool, knees folding, chest plates slamming into the arena floor with a sickening crunch. Dust exploded outward. Silence swallowed everything. He didn't move. Didn't raise the weapon again. Just stood there, arms slack, gun still hanging at his side. He looked at the wreckage, then turned and walked back the way he came. It took a while for the crowd to react, not from fear, but confusion. Some hadn't seen it clearly. Others didn't believe what they had seen. It wasn't possible. Not like that. Not with that. A dozen theories would start that night, 100 by morning. That it was rigged, that the mech had failed on its own, that the shot had been something more. But none of that mattered, because the mech didn't rise. All it had taken was one shot, the right shot, and a hand steady enough to fire it. Somewhere deep beneath the ruined floor, the heat sinks continued to cool. Somewhere inside the down machine, the pilot sat in a tomb of silence, replaying the moment again and again, searching for the signal he missed. But there had been no warning, no power spike, no trick. Just a single shot from a forgotten weapon, placed with the kind of precision you couldn't train for. The arena would be quiet for a long time, not from fear, from awe. Because something had changed and everyone felt it. Not just in their eyes, but in their teeth, their bones, the parts of them that recognized truth even before the mind could name it. The unbeatable had fallen, and the one who brought it down had done so not with might or speed or status, just with nerve and aim.